So picture this. It's the summer of 1863, and two absolutely massive armies are marching right towards each other in Pennsylvania. But here's the thing, the outcome of this epic struggle wasn't just going to be decided by bullets and bayonets. No, it was going to be shaped by something hidden, something you couldn't see, the very wiring of their command structures. We're going to dive into the chaos, the rivalries, and the huge gambles that defined the leadership of both sides on the eve of the Civil War's most famous battle. This quote from historian Alan Gelzo just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? This wasn't just another battle on the schedule. This was huge, an event of continental importance. You can almost feel the tension. The stakes were just impossibly high, and everything was hanging in the balance as these two forces barreled towards a little town most of them had never even heard of, Gettysburg. All right, so we've got the armies on the move, but to really get what's about to unfold, we have to look past all the flags and the marching soldiers. We need to get inside the heads of the guys in charge. We have to understand the systems and, well, the lack of systems that were supposed to be holding it all together. Now, before we start comparing the Union and the Confederates, we've got to grasp this one massive thing they both had in common. Neither of them was a professional army like you'd see in Europe. Not even close. For the most part, they were armies of amateurs, and believe me, that one single fact changes everything. And the difference was just, it was night and day. A professional European army, that was made of career soldiers led by officers who trained for this their whole lives. But in America, you had volunteers. These were temporary soldiers, farmers, shopkeepers, who often elected their own officers. Think about that. They had, as one person put it, a very high self-esteem and very little discipline. They actually believed they had the right of private judgment, even on the battlefield. It was a completely different mindset. So, what do you get when you mix all that together? Well, you get this, a recipe for absolute chaos. You've got inexperienced officers learning on the job in the middle of a war. You've got poor discipline, super inefficient staff work. I mean, one Union scout said you could literally smell the Confederate army from a distance because their sanitation was so bad. So you have these two giant, powerful, but incredibly clumsy and disorganized machines about to slam right into each other. Okay, so keeping that chaos in mind, let's zoom in on the Union's Army of the Potomac. On paper, they tried to fight against all this amateurism with a very rigid, by-the-book system of command. But as you're about to see, sometimes the rules just create even bigger problems. And the heart of the Union system was this one idea: seniority. It sounds pretty logical, right? Your authority, your rank, it's all based on how long you've been a major general. The date on your commission decides your spot in the pecking order. This was supposed to create a clear, unbreakable chain of command. In theory, anyway. But in reality, yeah, it was this. The seniority system actually created this toxic soup of political backstabbing and resentment. Everybody was constantly counting the names ahead of them on the list, always looking for an angle to get promoted. Instead of creating order, it just fueled a ton of ambition and jealousy. The system itself was a source of the chaos. And this is the perfect example of how it all went wrong. It's the first day at Gettysburg, the battle is just spiraling out of control, so the Union Army commander, General Meade, he makes a call. He sends his best guy, his most trusted subordinate, Winfield Scott Hancock, to get to the battlefield and take charge. A totally logical move in a crisis. But yeah, there is just one problem, a really big one, and it was rooted entirely in that seniority system we were just talking about. Turns out, the officer who was already on the field, a guy named General Oliver Otis Howard, was senior to Hancock, and not just by a little bit. Hancock was four steps below Howard on the official seniority list. So when Hancock shows up and says, "Hey, I'm in charge," Howard is, and this is a quote, "deeply mortified." These two generals actually get into an argument over who's in command while the battle is raging all around them. Unbelievable. So how could this even happen? Well, it's because President Lincoln knew the seniority system was a mess, so he had given Meade special permission to just ignore it whenever he thought he had to. And right there, you have this explosive collision, a rigid, rule-based system crashing head-on with the personal authority of a commander. That right there was the central flaw of the Union leadership. All right, let's switch gears and look at the Confederates. If the Union's big problem was a broken system, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia had a totally different kind of challenge. Its command structure wasn't really based on rules at all. It was based almost entirely on the personality and the vision of one single man, Robert E. Lee. Lee's own men saw him as audacity itself. He was aggressive, he was a risk-taker, and his whole army was a reflection of his personality. So where the Union command was all stiff and political, the Confederate command was dynamic. It was built on this deep personal trust in Lee. But that, of course, created a whole different set of risks. Lee's entire strategy for this campaign was one massive gamble. His big idea was to invade Pennsylvania, win a spectacular knockout victory, and just shatter Northern morale. He thought it would force Lincoln's government to the negotiating table to end the war. This was an all-or-nothing roll of the dice, and it absolutely depended on his army's leadership performing perfectly. No room for error. But then, just as he's planning this whole thing, disaster strikes. His most brilliant commander, his right-hand man, Stonewall Jackson, is killed. It's a devastating blow. And it forces Lee into this incredibly high-stakes, last-minute reorganization. He has to break his army up from 2 big, experienced corps into 3 smaller, untested ones. And he's doing this just weeks before the most important campaign of the entire war. So let's meet the new team. You've got James Longstreet, Lee's old warhorse. He's reliable, but he can be really stubborn. Then there's Richard Ewell, who has the impossible job of replacing Jackson. He's brave, for sure, but Lee himself worried about his want of decision. And A.P. Hill, leading the brand new 3rd Corps, a great fighter, but he had a hot-headed temper. So this is the team Lee is gambling the entire fate of the Confederacy on. A mix of real strengths, but also some pretty big and potentially fatal flaws. So as these 2 giant armies get closer and closer to Gettysburg, you can see that both of them are carrying the weight of their own internal problems. In the end, it all comes down to the human factor, the systems, the personalities, all about to be tested under the most extreme pressure imaginable. And this really boils it all down. The Union's crisis was a crisis of system. They had these rigid rules that just created more conflict and confusion. The Confederacy's crisis was a crisis of personnel. They had this bold, audacious vision that depended completely on a brand new, unproven command team to somehow live up to the legend of Stonewall Jackson. You've got 2 armies, 2 totally different but equally dangerous internal ticking time bombs. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? When these 2 imperfect, chaotic military machines finally collided, whose leadership would hold up? Whose internal flaws would be the first to crack under the strain? In the command and chaos of Gettysburg, which army's structure was about to bend and which one was about to break?